is Dr. Suceena Alexander. She is the professor in the Department of Nephrology. She's a fellow of the American Society of Nephrology. She also happens to be our Deputy Director, Quality. That's a big, big responsibility, wherein she works very closely with our quality management cell. Over to you, Dr. Suceena.
Greetings, everyone. My talk is on clinical process improvement through clinical audits. So all the speakers before me have already given you numerous examples on clinical audits. So do I really need to have this talk? Yes or no? Or differently put, do all clinical audits lead to clinical improvement or quality improvement? So in the next 10 minutes, I'll just give an overview of the relationship between clinical audits and quality improvement or clinical process improvement. And then I'll dwell a little bit briefly on our experience and challenges in CMC. And I'll end by giving you two simple clinical audits that have been done by our clinicians that led to quality improvement. So quality improvement process, that word is embedded in the definition of clinical audit. So simply put, what is a clinical audit? It's an audit that assesses a certain part of the healthcare and measures it against a recognized standard. So all of you are aware of this audit cycle. Now, what I want to emphasize in this is that an audit cycle is not complete without doing a re-audit to measure the changes of the quality improvement. Okay, so that is the most important message from this slide. Now, what is quality improvement then? Quality improvement is something that improves the patient experience. So then how does clinical audit lead to quality improvement? So once you decide on an audit, then you agree on the measures, you define the measures, you collect the data, and then you generate results. And once you generate results, when you start asking yourself the question, do these results measure against your quality expectations, that's when you start your journey towards quality improvement. So then you will have feedback with the stakeholders, and you will have brainstorming sessions. You will hit upon a plan for improvement, you and your team, and then you will implement it, and then do a re-audit to measure the improvement that has happened with your implementation. Now this re-audit can be either one cycle, or it can be repeat cycles of action and repeat measurements to make it a continuous quality improvement exercise. So now, we have talked about, I asked you in the beginning, right, a question that whether all clinical audits lead to clinical improvement. And the speakers before me have also answered it for you, and the answer is an emphatic no. So some of the clinical audits that you undertake are not for clinical improvement. They are just for quality assurance. That is, you're just measuring yourself against some regulatory standards and compliances that you need to maintain in your hospital. So another important aspect of quality improvement is teamwork. So there has to be a shared sense of responsibility, especially there has to be a buying in from the top management team for the changes to be implemented. Otherwise, it will still just remain as a clinical audit. Okay, so now is all of you, are you ready to go back to your departments and your institutions, do a clinical audit, and then assume that changes will be implemented? Of course not. So I'll just briefly touch upon our experiences in CMC and the challenges that we have had. So all of you know the vastness of our institute, but many of you are not aware that excellence is embedded in the vision statement of our institute. So in 2009, there was the quality audit facilitation cell was started by the administration under the quality management. And this performing an audit became an important mandate for the quality management cell. So did this automatically result in clinical audits? No. So still the clinical audits were far and few between, and it was hardly done by clinicians. And in the NABH final assessment, an NC was raised, saying that non-compliance was raised in the area of clinical audits. The administration took this as a positive note, and along with quality management, took this as a quality improvement exercise for the institute. So what happened next? So out of the many challenges that we identified, one challenge is that clinicians are busy people. And even though there's a felt need for clinical audit, they do clinical audits as a last priority. So the administration, which was then headed by Dr. Thomas Kuriakose, liaised with our MGR Medical University, and after a lot of back and forth, the MGR University made it mandatory for all interns and postgraduates to have a clinical audit performed as part of their course completion. And this was a notice from the university. So with this, it was easier for us, for the quality management, to facilitate along with the clinicians, and the audit process happened. And this was then published by our open access institutional journal, Quality Journal, which is maintained by the Quality Management Cell. And as you can see, the figures have been steadily improving, especially in the last 3 years. And now, last year, we published about 80 clinical audits in our institutional journal. So now I'll end with giving you 2 simple examples of clinical audits. So one important thing that I told you was you need to do a re-audit to measure changes. Other important thing is to keep it as simple as possible. And this was emphasized by Dr. Ranjan also in his talk, that the process has to be simple. It cannot be complicated. So this was a clinical audit done by Dr. V. Rajkamal. It was on the use of TED stockings. TED stockings is something that's prescribed to all the post-operative surgical patients to prevent embolization. Now, the background was he wanted to know if the TED stocking was written in an audit sheet, was it really given to the patient at the end of the day? So the question was a very simple question. And the audit was performed for a week in 2017. And as you can see, though 100% of patients needed to get TED stockings, there was only 80% compliance. So this led to a lot of departmental discussions. The problems were identified, ways were suggested by the nurses and the clinicians, and this was implemented, and a re-audit was done, and the re-audit showed us there was more than 15% improvement in this area. The second simple audit that I will tell you is about labeling of peripheral lines in labor room, and this was done by Dr. David Matthew Daniel. The WHO says that an IV line should be there only for 72 hours. And this can be monitored only if you put the date and the time on the IV line. So the question was very simple. How many patients in labor room had labeling of the date and time on the IV lines? And this was performed for about an hour in 2016 in the labor room. The labor room has different wards or sections. And you can see the compliance was a universally non-compliant. So nobody had time or date labeled in their IV lines. After this, there was a process of awareness, education. There was a buy-in from the nursing and the clinicians. And a re-audit done, this was in February of last year, showed that there was a huge improvement in compliance. So these are 2 simple examples of how clinical audits can lead to quality improvement if you work as a team. Another aspect I want to highlight is that all audits that you do, it's good if you can put it in an open access forum. For example, we publish all our clinical audits. There's a link on the intranet to our quality journal, which publishes all the audits that are done. And this helps in dissemination and facilitation of the clinical audit process. So we did receive, after this, we did receive some accolades from the NABH assessors on clinical audits. This was in November 2013, followed by July 2014, when they appreciated our process that we had established for clinical audits. and later on led to the prestigious D.L. Shah Award for clinical audits as a model for the nation. Thank you.